The IINE Ananke is back in its second iteration, but was there a need for this version 2? And did they fix my complaints for version 1? Well, thanks to IINE providing me with 2 of them, I was able to figure this out. First of all, out of the box they feel identical to the first version. Despite its size, it fits well in my hands. The plastic from the shell to the buttons and D-pad feels great, and the button resistance is tighter than expected. Really, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. With that being said, they did change some things. The most notable is the colors. Currently, they are available in the GameCube and in a Game Boy color scheme. Especially the Game Boy one just makes sense since it is based around the Game Boy. Also, while on the topic, they did nail the colors pretty well. Added to that, they also already announced a set of 3 pastel colors, which do look quite nice if I might say so. Then the next thing I noticed is that the box itself is a bit smaller. I don't have the V1 here anymore, but you can clearly see it in a screen cap here. And the last thing that stood out is the manual. It is slightly redesigned. I like the first version better, but this is just a nitpick. As for what is in the box, I already mostly covered it, but in the box you get the controller, a USB A to C cable, which I think is a bit smaller than on the V1, the manual, and this silicone wrist strap. Then I get to the advertised specs and functions, which is where the V2 shows the most differences to the V1. The V1 came with a turbo mode, D-pad to stick switch, and a keyboard mode. The V2, however, has all of that, plus a 6-axis gyro, Joycon, mouse, air mouse, touch, and media mode. I'll get to those in a bit more detail later. As for the hardware, first I tested the actuation force. Both are slightly different in that regard, but are within a margin of error. For the GameCube version, I got ABXY with 120 grams, 125 grams, 115 grams, and 110 grams. Then for the D-pad, I get up 150 grams, down 175 grams, left 160 grams, and right 170 grams. And last, plus with 160 and minus with 165 grams. As for the Game Boy version, I got 120 grams for A, 110 grams for B, X and Y. The D-pad then got 155 grams for up, 175 grams for down, 160 grams for left and 170 grams for right. Then the plus minus came in at 160 each. Now you might have noticed where the plus and minus buttons are located on this controller. This was one of my pain points for the V1, and it sadly did not change in this revision. The controller, however, already got a few firmware updates, so I do hope that they might allow rebinding for the plus and minus and home and capture buttons in the future. One big thing with the Ananke is of course how limited it is when it comes to gaming, as you are missing 2 sticks, thus this is really only useful for retro and indie games. But I think no one is going to be shocked about that when they look at this controller. Then in my review for the V1, I did mention how the D-pad is near perfect, and this rings true for the V2 as well. It still performs very well in the Contra test, and still belongs to one of my favorite D-pads made. While there was no regression, there also wasn't really any improvements, as the left bottom corner of the D-pad still causes left inputs. And now I get to the Joycon mode. This is a mode where I didn't really know at first what to do with it, and still kinda don't know. What it does is that the Ananke pretends to be a right Joy-Con. I wondered if it might also be able to act as a left one, but nope, right only. It works very well for something like Mario Kart, where you hold it horizontally, but when you hold it vertically, it just feels somewhat uncomfortable. This even more so when you have to press the shoulder buttons and you have to change the grip back and forth. It will do in a bind, but I would not want to use this as a replacement for my right Joy-Con long term. And now, while I'm already here with the Switch, I want to quickly mention Gyro. It is a perfectly fine implementation, and works probably the best for something like Mario Kart. Then I get to the modes that are not 100% gaming focused. First is the keyboard mode. It's exactly what you would think. You can assign a keyboard key or 2 to one button each, which then will be executed. Now, you won't be typing an essay with one of those, but it can still be very useful for something like OBS with shortcuts, or older games which do not have controller support. On PC, I used to use something called PadStar for that, to play RPG Maker games and such. This takes care of that for you. The one thing I would find a bit more useful is if I could hold the key on a keyboard and then press the actual key to assign the keys. I then get to the mouse mode that the V2 has. And no, it's not like the Switch 2 where you can use it like an actual mouse. You essentially have two ways to use it. First, you can use the buttons of the controller themselves, where by default the movement is bound to the D-pad and clicks on scroll are bound to A, B, X, Y. Then the second is by activating the air mouse mode, which makes use of the gyro to move the mouse. In both cases, I found the implementation lackluster. By default, the mouse is extremely slow with the buttons, and the air mouse seems to really not want to go left or move up too far. There's then also the button bindings. The ones I mentioned are pretty much all you get for the mouse mode. Even though you can also bind the triggers, you don't have something like a middle click, forwards, backwards, and maybe D-pad up and down. I hope IINE can add those, since it is what I need like 80% of the time for my current air mouse I use on my TV PC anyways. Then the touch mode is something where I didn't fully know how they would implement it, but the way it works is actually quite simple. In the app itself, you can set where each button points to on the screen, and then assign an action to it. So as an example, A by default just taps on the screen, while left taps on the screen and then moves left until let go. In the app, you can also open a screenshot to use as a reference, which I greatly appreciate. I don't have much use for it myself, but it could be useful for things like TikTok scrolling, Tinder, etc. Hey, you could even advance a teleprompter on your phone. And finally, the Multimedia Mode. It's pretty self-explanatory. You get volume up, volume down, previous and next track, play and pause. It's simple, but it works. I used to listen to a lot of music while gaming, and this would be great for that. So while not groundbreaking, it does serve its purpose. In conclusion, I would say that I still recommend the IINE Ananke, and there's no reason to pick up the V1 over the V2, besides the colors. You get plenty of versatile features, and I can see people buying these, for example as a novelty remote for their Android-based radio, or even just as a fidget toy. I've more than once just played around with it during a meeting over the past week. That being said, IINE seems committed enough to the Mini, so I will be interested to see what they do next, both with this line and with other devices. And I also hope that you, the viewer, are committed to hit that subscribe button.